Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio. So today, we are looking at another supporter card from the upcoming Sun and Moon 6 expansion. It is Diantha. Ladies and gentlemen, I've not been as hot on the new cards as I could have been over the past few days. I've been travelling back from Australia, where I had a wonderful time commentating the Pokémon Oceania International Championships. I am now back, so yeah, should be a little bit more on it. Life is good, and speaking of good, this supporter card is pretty gosh darn good. It reads that you can only use it if you had a fairy Pokemon knocked out during your opponent's last turn, but if you did, you get to search your discard pile for any 2 cards and put them into your hand. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a recovery card. And recovery cards have often been popular, but the thing is, recovery cards vary. So if you want to recover a Pokemon, for instance, just play a Super Rod or a Rescue Stretcher. Recovering Pokemon is not particularly difficult to do. But if you want to recover something like a Special Energy card, think about that double colorless energy, which is so important, then oh my goodness, that's a lot more difficult. At the moment, we do have access to Special Charge, which allows you to search your discard for 2 Special Energy and shuffle them back into your deck, but that's going to be gone when we rotate in September. We've got Puzzle of Time, that 2 of these cards, if played together, allow the same effect as this particular supporter card. Search your discard for any 2 cards and put them into your hand. That allows you to get Special Energy back, but that's going to be going when we have the rotation in September. Think about supporter cards. At the moment, the only real way we've got to recover supporter cards, other than Puzzle of Time, is Lusamine. Lusamine is a card that allows you to search your discard for 2 in any combination of stadiums and supporter cards and put them into your hand. Well, Diantha here allows you to basically do the same thing, except you're not just confined to having to go for stadium cards or supporter cards. You can in fact go for whatever cards you like. And just because you've got options like Rescue Stretcher doesn't mean you're not going to occasionally want to go and grab a Pokemon using this. So before we get more into exactly what you're going to recover and all of that good stuff, we need to talk about the couple of caveats in order to use this. First of all, this is a card that can only be used if you had a fairy Pokemon knocked out during your opponent's last turn. And there's an important ruling query here that we've seen in the past with teammates, and that is poison. You see, the thing is, if a Pokemon is KO'd by poison, then it is actually KO'd between turns. So in the same way you couldn't use a teammate's if you had a Pokemon KO'd by poison, because it was KO'd between turns, you cannot use Diantha if you had a fairy Pokemon KO'd by poison, because that means it wasn't KO'd during your opponent's last turn, it was KO'd between turns, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is not the same thing. The other thing we need to mention here is that, of course, it's only for fairy Pokemon. Now, at the moment, we're golden because Gardevoir Gx. I did a video just yesterday about how Gardevoir Gx, in combination with Zoroark Gx, really did take the Oceania International Championships by storm. It not only won, but as I explained in the video, it was played by a group of Europeans, all of whom did well. So clearly Gardevoir is a very, very good Pokemon right now. And it's not just with Zoroark, we see it played on its own, we see it played with Sylveon GX, for instance. It's a good card, it's in a bunch of decks, it sees a lot of play. Now, the interesting thing about Gardevoir is that Gardevoir has Twilight GX, this GX attack that allows you to take any 10 cards from your discard pile and shuffle them into your deck. So some people might look at this and go, hang on a second, do we really need Diantha if we're already playing Gardevoir with Twilight GX? And the answer very simply is yes. Because if you look at the list that did well with Gardevoir Zoroark in Sydney, Australia this past weekend, they played for Puzzle of Time. They like this recovering. You can use Twilight GX, and Twilight GX is great, but it's your attack for the turn. It's your only GX attack for the game. Sometimes you need to recover a little bit more, that's where Diantha comes in. Now obviously for some things it's better than others. So let's take supporter cards for instance. Guzma's a great example of this. Often you'll see players, Gardevoir players and any other deck players, trying to get extra Guzma to use in the late game, because you can grab a Pokemon off your opponent's bench and oftentimes you can KO them, and that will then lead you to victory. The thing is, we've got Lusamine at the moment, but the awkward thing with Lusamine is that you play it to get a Guzma back, and then you've got to wait a turn to actually be able to use that Guzma, which is a little bit of a pain. Plus, of course, you're then really telegraphing to your opponent that that's what you're going to do next turn, so then your opponent is going to want to play something like an N to make sure that you've got to then go and find that Guzma if you want to use it next turn. But for something like Special Energy, think about the aforementioned double colourless, which is a really important card that sees a lot of play in Gardevoir decks. It's a 4-of, because Gardevoir's attack does 30 damage for each energy attached to the active, both actives. So frankly, the more energy you can get on, the better. In that context, getting the double colourless energy back with this is great. Special Charge is all well and good, but then they're back in your deck and you need to find them. Puzzle of Time is played for stuff like this. I don't see any reason why Diantha wouldn't be. Similarly with stuff like Pokemon, even let's take Rescue Stretcher, a great card for recovering Pokemon. But Rescue Stretcher either puts one Pokemon into your hand or 3 Pokemon into your deck. Now it is an item, not your only supporter for the turn, so that gives it a lot more ease of use. But sometimes you are going to want to get 2 Pokemon from your discard pile back into your hand, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly where Diantha comes in. And we can look at this card and say that it is definitely a good card because it has shades of cards that are seeing play. Puzzle of Time is not the easiest card ever to use. You've got to play 2 of them at the same time in order to recover 2 cards. Now I know their item card's not a supporter, but we have seen, in this format especially, how good that can be. I mean, let's go back to these Zoroark decks. One of the great advantages Zoroark decks have is that they have trade. And in an ideal world, 3 or 4 trades per turn. Discard 1 card from your hand and draw 2 cards from your deck. So that means that they're not really relying on draw supporters per se. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where you come in with Diantha, because then you can afford it to be your supporter for the turn. There were multiple times on the stream this past weekend where we saw players playing against a Buzzwole deck, for instance, with Zoroark Gardevoir, and all they needed was a Mew EX and a double colourless energy. If those players are able to use Zoroark to trade into a Diantha, then all of a sudden you've got the Mew and the double colourless energy, and that's the game right there and then. Even something like a Lusamine, it doesn't see a huge amount of play, but it does see play. And if you're playing a fairy deck, there are few reasons to play Lusamine over this. But there are some. Because, of course, let's say you're playing Gardevoir Zoroark, it's all very well and good having Diantha, but you can only use it when you had a fairy Pokemon KO'd the previous turn. So if your opponent KOs a Zoroark, you don't have access to this. If they KO a Gallade, you don't have access to this. And let's face it, every deck at the moment is playing Tapu Lele GX. Now, the good news is that Tapu Lele GX means that you can search out Diantha nice and easily. But the bad news here is that if your opponent KOs a Tapu Lele, you're not getting access to this supporter card the following turn. And actually, as a nice quick rules query here, you would be able to take it back if you tried to play it when you didn't have a fairy Pokemon KO'd the previous turn, because you're not allowed to play it. So one of the classics here is playing something like a Guzma against a Primal Groudon. Primal Groudon stops effects of the Guzma, so it wouldn't actually drag Groudon in the active, but you play the Guzma, see it had no effect, and you've used your supporter for the turn. Assuming that the wording holds true when it comes over in English, that means that if you tried playing Diantha when you didn't have a fairy Pokemon KO'd the previous turn, it would fail and you'd still be able to use a different supporter, which I suppose is at least one small mercy. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, this is a great card. It's not the easiest card ever to use. It's only for fairy decks or decks playing a lot of fairy Pokemon. But as long as you are playing a lot of fairy Pokemon, this is a no-brainer. Teammates is a good card. This is kind of like a Teammates from the discard for fairy decks. But Teammates saw a lot of play. Puzzle of Time has seen a lot of play. So I don't see any reason why this wouldn't. Okay, it's really just for fairy decks, but in fairy decks, this is an absolutely great card, and I'm giving it 4 Wassies. If it wasn't for the fact that you had to have a fairy Pokemon KO'd the previous turn, this would be a consider it in every deck 5 Wassie card. Brought down a little bit by the fact that it's quite niche, but ladies and gentlemen, this is a good card. You can expect to see this seeing play. But as always, I want to hear from you guys. So let me know in the comment section, what do you think about this card? Do you think it's going to see a lot of play? Go nuts, but be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter or the Wassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and so on, you can do so over at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. And do please check out my video game channel, Wassie Plays. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.